This week's channeled message from the angels is talking about the new way that we will experience our environment as we move through the shift, about the downplay of the five senses and about the new senses that we will have access to. So it's a super cool message. So welcome back to my channel, you guys. It is great to have you here. And yes, I am in Bali and I would be outside, except it is hot. So I am inside and it's better Wi-Fi. So it's much better to record from here. So, but I will probably step outside and at least record an intro or something. So, but yeah, so those of you who are new here, my name is Ann Tucker. I am a trance channel, and by that I mean when I channel, I go into a deep meditative state, and from that state, I raise my awareness as high as I can go. I go a little higher, and I connect at the angelic realm, and then messages and healing come through, and I share them here with you guys on YouTube. I do that channeling before I channel. I dictate the messages. So some of you have asked about my process. I dictate. So the angels come through and they speak through my vocal cords. I dictate using Dragon software, and then that creates text, which I then go through and put in the punctuation, and I share here with you guys in this way. I do it that way rather than just channeling live. I usually, for these Friday Live messages, I like to do the channeling first and put in the punctuation because I find that it's easier for people to follow. That with the sentence breaks and the punctuation where you expect it to be, and I can pause, and it helps people to follow what's being said. So, and then it also gives me time to go through and analyze it and think it through and be able to share the meaning with you guys. So, yeah. So, anyways, this particular message is it's a very cool one. You know, they've been talking with us for a long time about this shift in consciousness and what it means for us. And they've talked about that we will have access to telepathy, that we're moving into oneness. But in this message, it's literally like they're describing how we will experience our world. And we were joking about in the last, like maybe one or two messages ago, we were joking about how the perception of the world is like the energy is jiggly, right? And like it's literally like moving through the world becomes different. Like we become aware of everything as energy, not as like you might see a table and think, oh my gosh, this is, like this is solid. But in our new state of awareness, we see it as, yes, it's solid. We can touch it and we can perceive it as moving electrons, right? As something that is permeable because it's energy. So they've been talking with us about this concept. Well, here they talk about the perception we will have, how we will access the state of oneness, and how it changes our understanding of what reality is. So it's a fascinating message. I wanted to also let you guys know before we get started that Soul Convergence, the new round of Soul Convergence, starts February 10th. And if you feel called to heal, because right now is the time, this is the period, this last period of time before we go through this major shift is when we have access to all of our past lives, to the depth of our soul, to heal as much as we care to take full advantage of this earth school that we are in, while we still have the karmic construct, right? This is the time that we can use to really heal as much as we want to heal. Every bit of healing we do right now, we carry with us forever as souls. So, so the soul convergence process is an 11-week deep process where we go through and we're able to bring to the surface and clear really the major issues of your soul's journey. It has been an amazing process. We've been through it once before, and the experiences people had were phenomenal. The goal is to be able to balance your masculine and feminine energies. And we found that we do the first 4 weeks, we're focused on masculine energy. We take a 2-week break to integrate, and then we do 5 weeks on the feminine energy. And what we found is that even after the first 4 weeks, just by looking at, because we're monitoring people's progress through their dreams, we can see the shifting happening in their dreams. And after the first 4 weeks, we had over half the people had already balanced their masculine energy. And then we move into the feminine, and some people's masculine is really deeply intertwined with their wounding is interlocked with the feminine. So we have to go through the feminine to then go through that same process. But it was remarkable to see the progress that people made on their journey. They came away feeling really where the goal is to get to the place where you feel less friction in your life, right? Where maybe your life has a lot of things in it that look the same relationships, same people, same living in the same home, whatever it may be. but you feel differently in it, right? Your response to it has changed, where things don't bother you the way that they used to. It's living in a life that feels more friction free. So you become peaceful, right, in your own heart. Yeah, so it's an amazing process. And if you are interested, it's on my website, anntucker.com. And it's called Soul Convergence. And I would love to have you join us. We start February 10th. So I will also put a link to a live that we did where we shared many of the healing stories from our last round. So you can get an understanding of the process that people went through and what they experienced. So I'll put the link to that below in the description box. All right, so let's get started on today's message. So here it is. All right, so I'm calling this one New Senses Will Guide You. And here's what they say. Still ones, the breath of your heart is awakening. We speak to you now of the coming times. You are being held in instrumentation as a method by which you read the surroundings. The feelings you are having guide you now. Sense you are holding in the position of appointment the physical body as an encounter to this highly orchestrated unveiling. A new circumstance surrounds you now, and the awareness that it holds, the encounter, the physical stuff of sensibilities, the sense you are endowed with come into play. The awarenesses you are having bodily, the physical formulation of reality does feel in and of itself as an encounter with the now forming day. It fills what you are. Its appearance, smell, the endowment of the senses. But in this interplay between yourselves and what's around you now, you herald a change, a transfer of awareness that blinds you temporarily to what is coming. On the horizon, what forms what you are sensible of is the fatiguing memories of encountering what is hardship, the physical sensations of where you are. The memories you have formed based on the physical substance of feelings, separated only by the suggestion of sensation, a physical longing for something of peace and surrender. The fragrance of now overpowers. The senses of where you are transform yourselves bodily. The empowerment of the physical space is to encounter you as an endowment of presence, to draw you into the fever of awareness, to let you encounter it as a suggestive pose, as a formulaic transfer of your own selves into physical presence. This endowment you have been given in the appearance of fragrance, of subtle hearing, of sight and sense. It draws you into the feelings of momentary recall and awareness. It traps you within an embrace of intensification. It holds you there, even now, in the surrendering pose of intoxication, and lets you be revealed as what you are. In the now that is coming, you surrender here less. Less imposing becomes the senses where you are, less aware of fragrance, of the passage as it is measured by what is seen and felt in the eyes. In the heart, there is no boundary between yourself and what is. There is no awareness that can come to self beyond what is. There is no sensibility that is required or needed to draw you into relationship, which comes easily, the easy endowment. The fragility of the communion, it blossoms into regularity. The five senses, though they interplay and reawaken upon suggestive understanding, they are not the guide that is spoken. They are not the figurative meaning of reality as you are perceiving. They are not the sensory organs of your most dedicated awareness. They become the second fiddle. The feelings of light and laughter linger and draw you closer to what is feeding your heightening comprehension. The awareness is softening, a lighter prospect drawing you into a stationary reverie where you can absorb a sensory apparatus that attunes you now to the greatness of all things, to the awarenesses that cascade upon you now. From the perspective of this heightening state, your own bodily apparatus is still needed. It is still a part of sense and feeling, but it is not your primary guide any longer. The awarenesses which cascade and fall like tendrils and vines that appear to you, these become the sensory pleasure, a sense of further integration with the all. Awarenesses that draw you into the semblance of becoming another thing, becoming into oneness, an understanding of heart expansion. A feeling that you are wandering in the jungle of happenings that happen at a fevered pitch. The awarenesses you attune to begin speaking loudly, and these cascade around your perception, and you become, in the midst of this vibratory column which holds you and endows you the graceful presence of perception. It feels to the self like a melding, like a transfer of perceptual understanding from one organism to the next. These happenings can transfer with them the wisdom of each being, the feelings they contain. The sensory apparatus, as it has been, becomes secondary. It no longer contains the same meaningful interaction with your space. It holds within it navigational tools that separate you from what is physical, but they cannot embrace this larger picture which is now available to you. They cannot feel, see, or touch what your awareness can perceive. Thus, the embodiment, as you have been graced, becomes a vehicle tangential to what is real. The self as you are becomes the operator of a livelihood and way of living that extends far beyond the capacity of the physical being. And this, we say, is your enjoyment to come. So yeah, super cool message. Super cool message. So it's really talking about what is going to be like. Like, what are we going to perceive? How do we perceive? How is it going to be so different, from how we have been, where really, I think one of our goals has been in terms of trying to find our heart, trying to move from the head to the heart, has been about trying to use the physical senses, use the physical body and being embodied, knowing that the physical body is how we manifest, right? This is the tool. It's almost like a way that we attune to a radio frequency, the body is. So using the senses, it's like, that's why when we go into meditation, they're like, focus on the breath, because it's a physical sensation that can pull you out of your head and down into the embodiment and closer to the heart. But here they're saying that it's a shift. It's a major shift where, yes, the physical senses still are important. Like, we still use them. And it sounds like we focus on them in the same way that if you imagine that your awareness is like a spotlight, and wherever you put it, gets bigger. If you put your spotlight over here, you focus on that. Well, if we focus on the five senses, then they become larger, right? That we become aware, just like right now, like you might not be at all aware of your sense of smell at the moment until I mention it. And now all of a sudden you might notice what smells are around you because we put your awareness on it. So the five senses might be like that. But so they're still there. They're just no longer the most important thing in terms of navigating our environment. And it sounds like, from what they're saying, is that the five senses have played a much larger role in our perception of our reality than we even realize. That we may think that we are operating or running through life using mostly our head, but the head is responding to what we perceive with the five senses. So really, the five senses has been our primary navigational tool, our primary guide in moving through this reality up until now. And they're saying that that won't be the case any longer, that the five senses become secondary. And what becomes primary is this sixth sense that we will have, this integration with the all, which, I think we could think of it as, our our third eye, right? But I think it's more than that. I think it is well, they describe it better than I could, but let's go through and talk about it paragraph by paragraph and break it down, and see if we can get more clarity. All right. So here is what they say. They say, still ones, the breath of your heart is awakening. We speak to you now of the coming times. And they go on to say, you are being held in instrumentation as a method by which you read the surroundings. So in other words, we are being held in the body, and the body is like an instrument which can read, right? A method by which you read the surroundings. We are being held in instrumentation. The body is an instrument by which we can navigate. So we have all the physical senses are part of this instrumentation, just like we were a pilot and had a big control board with all the dials and stuff like that. Well, that's what this body is, except we're fully integrated into it, right? And it's a method by which we read our surroundings. The feelings you are having guide you now. Sense you are holding in the position of appointment the physical body as an encounter to this highly orchestrated unveiling. So here they're saying the feelings we have guide us now. So our feelings respond to our environment. We have the five senses which perceive our environment, and our feelings respond to the environment. And then they say that the senses that we're holding, which have been appointed to us, the physical body has been given to us, appointed to us, right, in order to encounter this highly orchestrated unveiling, this great shift. They're saying, which is no accident, is highly orchestrated. They go on to say, a new circumstance surrounds you now. And the awareness that it holds, the encounter, the physical stuff of sensibilities, the senses you are endowed with come into play. So we're heading into a brand new circumstance, things we have never encountered before. And they're saying, as we head into this and the awareness that it holds, right, the encounter of it, and this could be the big flash of light they're talking about, which a lot of you have been asking where the video is, where we talked about the flash of light. And I will post a link to that in the description box below as well. So you will see that video. So you don't have to go hunting for it. So, but that could be the big shift that they're talking about. In terms of the new circumstances, that's the moment that changes everything. They say that the awareness that it holds, the encounter, the physical stuff of sensibilities, the senses you are endowed with come into play. So we will have a physical sense. We will be using our physical senses as we move into these big changes. And they say, next paragraph, the awarenesses you are having bodily, the physical formulation of reality does feel in and of itself as an encounter with the now forming day. It fills what you are. So in other words, they're saying that we have the impression, because we are so integrated with the physical body, we have the impression that what we perceive with our five senses is what's here, that it defines reality, rather than thinking of it think of it this way, like you guys have heard that like dogs hear pitches that we can't hear with our own ears, right? That there are frequencies that are outside of human hearing. But from our perspective, the only sounds that exist are the ones that we can hear. So we think this bandwidth, this narrow bandwidth of sounds, is reality. Like this is what is real because we are aware of it. But there are all these other frequencies out there that other animals or beings on Earth can hear that are very real to them, but we have no awareness of. I think I heard recently that, was it whales or dolphins? I think it was whales, that they were recording conversations, and that there were whole conversations happening in frequencies that humans can't hear that showed very complex speech patterns between whales. But we just we never checked. We never checked outside of what was audible to us. So I think that reality, if it's possible in sound, then it's possible in everything, right? Sound is just vibration, frequency. And so it's possible in everything, that reality, that we have perceived reality to be what we can perceive with our five senses. But our five senses are operating within this narrow bandwidth. All of our senses, right, are operating in a narrow bandwidth. So, so they're saying that, right? They're saying the awarenesses you are having bodily, the physical formulation of reality, does feel in and of itself as an encounter with the non-forming day. So we define reality based on what we perceive, what we feel. It fills what you are, the appearance, the smell, the endowment of the senses. But in this interplay between yourselves and what's forming around you now, you herald a change, a transfer of awareness that blinds you temporarily to what is coming. So they're saying that things are going to change, that we're going to experience a change in how we perceive our reality. And they're saying that it's a transfer of our awareness. So our awareness, it's like we move our awareness from one thing to another. And that transfer blinds us to what is coming. So it's almost like we won't we won't see it coming. That's what they're telling us. Yeah. So okay, so it's going to be a surprise. All right, they go on to say, on the horizon, what forms, what you are sensible of, is the fatiguing memories of encountering what is hardship. And so they're talking about here, what is it to live in the world in our five senses? And our five senses, we perceive hardship, right? We perceive the things that are difficult. And so these experiences trigger memories of hardship. It brings up all of our junk, right? All of our fears. So, right. So they're saying that what you are sensible of is the fatiguing memories of encountering what is hardship, the physical sensations of where you are, the memories you have formed based on the physical substance of feelings, separated only by the suggestion of sensation, a physical longing for something of peace and surrender. So this has been like, what is it to be moving through the world with our five senses? We use our five senses. Like, think about how we learn to navigate our environment. We learn that the oven is hot because we touch it and we get burned, right? And we associate, oh, hot hurts, right? Ovens hurt, don't touch that, right? We learn as a child, like how not to fall down because falling down hurts, right? So we have, and think about that as life goes on, that the physical senses we are taught by pain. And so we have these associated memories, right, that really help they teach us, right? We learn through this, but it's also they're saying that the feelings as we interact with this experience of the challenge of moving up against our environment, what it creates is the feeling of physical longing for something of peace and surrender. So, and that's not to say that everything we perceive in our world is hardship. We perceive beauty, we perceive, there's delightful things, everybody gets dessert sometimes, like there's like most of life you can go through and say, yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful world. And you spend too much time in the sun and you get sunburned. So there's this interplay, right? And I think there's the desire with each of those moments of learning, there is that physical longing for peace. So we have a complicated relationship with our reality. And that's just at the body level, right? That's just at the level of our senses. So, okay. So then they go on to say, the fragrance of now overpowers. The senses of where you are transform yourselves bodily. The empowerment of the physical space is to encounter you as an endowment of presence, to draw you into the fever of awareness, to let you encounter it as a suggestive pose, as a formulaic transfer of your own selves into physical presence. So, and they're saying that the reality as we've been living it through the five senses, through the physical body, is deliberately overpowering. That the idea is to make it completely immersive, where we get lost in it, where we can't avoid it, where we encounter it, it comes up against us, and we have to face ourselves. So it overpowers, right? The senses of where you are transform ourselves bodily, right? They change us. And they say the empowerment of the physical space of this reality is to encounter you, like the deep you, as an endowment of presence. So this is our opportunity to really see ourselves, it reflected in our reality, to draw you into the fever of awareness. I love that. That is like this intensity of awareness. That's what the Earth School is all about, to let you encounter it as a suggestive pose, as a formulaic transfer of your own selves into physical presence. So I think that is such an amazing way of phrasing it, that it is almost as if your soul song is the formula and you sing that into your reality and it creates yourself to be then experienced through the five senses, right? And that then transforms us. So yeah, beautifully, beautifully said. All right, they go on to say, this endowment you have been given is the appearance of fragrance, of subtle hearing, of sight and sense. It draws you into the feelings of momentary recall and awareness. It traps you within an embrace of intensification. It holds you there, even now, in the surrendering pose of intoxication, and it lets you be revealed as what you are. So, so it's really, this is really talking about how the senses, it draws us into the feeling of momentary recall and awareness. So it's like it's really helping us to see ourselves not only as we are right now, but as we have been conditioned, as we have brought from previous experience, from past lives, right? Momentary recall and awareness. It brings these recalls all the aspects of ourselves and draws them into awareness. It traps you within an embrace of intensification. I love that. So it literally says, here's an aspect of yourself. We're going to portray it into the world around you in this fevered, can't get away from it moment. And it's going to allow you, and it's going to, when it's going to bring you, it's going to hold you in this intensification of self, so that we have to see ourselves, right? That's the kind of this whole design of this whole experience, and why the five senses have been so important, right? Super, super cool. And it says it lets you be revealed as what you are. All right, so now they shift, next paragraph, and they say, in the now that is coming, you surrender here less. So they're saying as we're coming forward in the new now, and this fits because they've been talking about how the karmic construct is changing, that we're moving from the karmic to the dharmic path, that we won't learn in the same way, that it doesn't have to be as painful. That doesn't mean that we won't still learn, but it won't be in the same way. That it's like it's not forced on us in the same way. So, in the now that is coming, you surrender here less. Less imposing becomes the senses where you are. Less aware of fragrance, of the passage as it is measured by what is seen and what is felt in the eyes. So they're really saying here that the five senses become less important. They go on to say, in the heart, there is no boundary between yourself and what is. There is no awarenesses. There is no awareness that can come to self beyond what is. There is no sensibility that is required or needed to draw you into relationship, which comes easily. The easy endowment, the fragility of the communion, it blossoms into regularity. So here they're saying that in the world as we've been living, there is a strong sense of self and other, and we use the five senses to navigate the other. And there's a sense of being very, very separate from what's outside of us. There's what's inside the body, and then there's what's outside the body, and we perceive it through these sort of, five senses. That's the only ways in are the five senses. And so there's this very much a sense of separation is what we have been experiencing. And they're saying in this new way of becoming, which is what they're describing, they're saying we are now experiencing the world through our heart. And they say in the heart, there is no boundary between yourself and what is. So the five senses don't make sense in this context, because the five senses are like, each one is like an opening that allows a little bit of information to come through, right? Just enough, just a little bit. Like when you touch, you feel just one thing, right? You're just having that one experience. But in the heart, there's literally no boundary between yourself and the all. So now they're saying there's no awareness that can come to self beyond what is. So it's not like we're seeking information, because all the information is already there. We are already one with the all. So they say there is no sensibility that is required or needed to draw you into relationship, which comes easily, the easy endowment. In other words, right now, if we want to have a relationship with something, we have to engage with it with the five senses. We have to see it, smell it, listen to it, connect with it, whatever it is, a glass of water, right? You perceive it with how many of your senses? Think about that. And then to go to the next level, a person, right? With a person, you engage everything. You're listening, you're looking, you're feeling, right? You're using all of your senses when you engage with a person to try to connect with them. And they're saying here that there is no sensibility that is required or needed to draw you into relationship, which comes easily. So relationship with the all, with others, with everything comes easily, the easy endowment, right? They say the fragility of the communion, it blossoms into regularity. So the communion used to be something fragile that we had to develop and be careful with and try to have. And they're saying now it blossoms into regularity, it becomes something that is just part of our experience, the relationship, the communion with the all. They go on to say the five senses, though they interplay and reawaken upon suggestive understanding. So, in other words, we can focus on our five senses. We can think about, okay, now I want to smell this, and you'll still be able to smell it, right? They can reawaken upon suggestive understanding, but they are not the guide that is spoken. So, in other words, right now, our five senses are what guide us through this world. They are how we navigate. That's what they are our go to, right? And they say, but they are no longer the guide that is spoken. They are not the figurative meaning of reality as you are perceiving. And I think it's an interesting choice. The figurative meaning. Figurative is like the metaphor. They're saying like they're basically saying that all of our reality as we perceive it is a metaphor for ourselves, as a metaphor for our inner world. So the five senses right now are showing us, portraying to us, we are experiencing a figurative meaning. It is a metaphor. The reality is all of reality is a metaphor for who we are. Super cool way of saying that, right? They go on to say they are not the sensory organs of your most dedicated awareness. What is the dedicated awareness? It's our higher self, right? It is that deep inner soul that we are. And they become second fiddle, the senses. So the five senses become second fiddle to our most dedicated awareness. All right, they go on to say the feelings of light and laughter linger and draw you closer to what is feeding your heightening comprehension. So here they're beginning to talk about how do we get there? How do we get to this new state of consciousness, to this new way of being? They're saying the feelings of light and laughter linger and draw you closer to what is feeding your heightening comprehension. The awareness is softening. So I think this is going to be a difficult thing for them to describe to us, because I think it's going to be a little bit like trying to talk about dancing, where it's much easier to experience dancing by dancing. And talking about dancing is you can get a close approximate, you can get a sense of it, right? But it's just not the same thing. And here they're trying to tell us about something we're going to experience, but they can only take it so far because we just don't have a frame of reference. We don't have a way of understanding it yet. So they say the feelings of light and laughter. So what is that? The feeling of light and laughter, they linger. So you can think about that. What does it feel like having a really good laugh, right? The feelings of that lightness, like if you let light in, when you do connect, when you feel connection with source, and same thing, laughter, by the way, is the frequency of healing. So, when you are in that state of laughter, feeling connected. So that's what draws us closer to what is feeding your heightened comprehension. They go on to say the awareness is softening. So, and that makes sense when you try to connect, and I know when I connect, I soften my awareness. It's like when I open up, I can feel my crown chakra opening, my third eye opening, and it softens. It's almost like it's a letting go, and it's a softening is the best way I can describe it. So I think it's cool they chose that word. The awareness is softening, a lighter prospect drawing you into a stationary reverie where you can absorb a sensory apparatus that attunes you now to the greatness of all things. So a stationary reverie is like a still and dreamlike state. Stationary is to be still, and a reverie is a dreamlike state. So they're really talking about like what I would experience is connection, right? So light and laughter draws you. Those are the feelings that bring us into this higher state of comprehension. You soften your awareness, and then a lighter prospect draws us into a stationary reverie or a still and dreamlike state. So sort of a meditative state where you can absorb a sensory apparatus, which is like, think of the five senses. Your sight is a sensory apparatus. It's a new sensory apparatus that attunes you now to the greatness of all things, to the awarenesses that cascade upon you now. So it is a new sense. It's just that it isn't going to be like an organ on our body. It's not going to be a thing you can poke like your eyeball. It's going to be it's an awareness, which is a sense. it is going to be the sixth sense. And how do we get there? It's through the feelings that they can bear to right now. The best way they can talk about dancing is to say, think about what it feels like when you attune to the light, when you attune to laughter. So think about that. That's how we get there, right? Those feelings that draw us closer, they say, that feeds the heightening comprehension. And then they say the awareness softens, and then a lighter prospect draws you into this still and dreamlike state. And from that still and dreamlike state, you absorb a sensory apparatus. So, and what I like about that is they're saying you absorb it, it comes into you, right? When you absorb something like a sponge, you absorb, it comes inside. It's not something that you visit and you are just you're in. It literally comes into you to absorb something, right? It enters you. So I don't know if that means we get to keep it permanently or if this is something we pull in and pull out of, right? That's an interesting question. But okay, you absorb a sense where you can absorb a sensory apparatus that attunes you now to the greatness of all things, to the awarenesses that cascade upon you now. So this becomes a new way of perception. Yeah, super, super interesting. All right, next paragraph. They say, from the perspective of this heightening state, your own bodily apparatus is still needed. It is still a part of sense and feeling, but it is not your primary guide any longer. So in other words, the physical senses are still there. Like we still need them because, when you're walking around, you still need to be aware of what's physically around you. We're still going to be living in a physical world, but we still need to know if the oven is hot, right? So we don't burn ourselves. They're saying that all those things still exist. So the bodily apparatus is still needed. It is still a part of sense and feeling, but it is not your primary guide any longer. The awarenesses which cascade and fall like tendrils and vines that appear to you, these become the sensory pleasure. So I think it is hilarious that they're talking about tendrils and vines and jungle because I literally am looking out at a jungle and they like to play with me like that. But I'll pick up the camera and show you at the end here that I'm literally looking out at a gorgeous jungle. But it's a great metaphor because think about how immersive a jungle is, that it's thick, right? It's full, it's vibrant, a jungle vibrates, you know. I remember watching one time, I think it was like Naked and Afraid, and they were showing, how it like as the people are sleeping, they have cameras that are showing things that are alive or awake at night, and they were showing the jungle floor, and it was literally like the floor came alive. It was like billions of ants and insects and everything's moving and like the whole jungle vibrates. So I think that what they're saying is that when we attune to the all, it is like everything is information. It's that idea, like what I was talking about before, that we perceive things as jiggling, that like everything becomes energy, and that we perceive everything is alive like a jungle. Like what feels so calm and so still and so solid around me right now, this room that I'm in would become vibrating. And I know that can sound, especially for those of you that are like empaths, that like all you want to do is turn the volume of the world down. I get the feeling that this will be something we can navigate, that it will be something that is not unpleasant in the same way that it has been for those of you that feel too much, right, for your own comfort. And we'll just have to see what that looks like. I don't know, but I can imagine that this is how more of the higher consciousness beings in the universe exist. And so if they can do it, we can too. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So okay, so they go on to say, going back to the awarenesses. So what is now our primary guide? They say the five senses is no longer our primary guide. The awarenesses which cascade and fall like tendrils and vines that appear to you, these become the sensory pleasure. So this is what becomes right. Instead of what becomes amazing being the amazing smells coming out of the kitchen at dinner time, it now becomes the incredible vibration that we feel or see or experience from the things around us. To feel another thing's energy becomes the sensory pleasure. Yeah, a sense of further integration with the all. Awarenesses that draw you into the semblance of becoming another thing, becoming into oneness, an understanding of heart expansion. So when we are feeling another thing or person's vibration, it's like becoming into oneness, that we experience them as they are, or it as it is, what it is, right? They go on to say, a feeling that you are wandering in the jungle of happenings that happen at a fevered pitch. The awarenesses you attune to begin speaking loudly, and these cascade around your perception, and you become in the midst of this vibratory column which holds you and endows you with the graceful presence of perception. So yeah, that's a paragraph right there. So think of it, and I said it's cool. Well, I'm going to show you the jungle after this, but they say a feeling that you are wandering in the jungle of happening. So that sense that everything is alive, right? And the happening at a fevered pitch. So it's like everything is very alive. Everything around you is very, very alive. And the awarenesses you attune to. And I think that is the critical thing here. It is, what is it that, where is it? It's just like now that at the moment, you are only using some of your senses. You're not attuned to all of your senses, that humans focus on one thing at a time. And so I think it'll be the same thing with this new perception, is that we may be in a jungle where everything is alive, but you probably are not going to attune to everything at the same time. You're going to attune to one thing, because we will still be in a human body. And one of the limitations of the human consciousness is that we can only focus on one thing at a time. We can't focus on, it's like there's all these intellectual or tests out there, perceptual tests where you'll look at something and sometimes you see it one way and it looks like a duck, and then you see it the other way and it looks like a bunny, but you can't see it as both the duck and the bunny at the same time. You can only see it one way or the other. That's because it's a limitation of our consciousness. And so when we are in the jungle where everything is alive, we will attune to one thing, and that is the one thing we will see. And so here they say the awarenesses you attune to, so the thing you focus on, begins speaking loudly. So imagine that you're in the jungle of where everything in the room is alive, but you focus on the one thing, and that thing comes up and rises up to your perception, and you feel and perceive what it is to be that one thing, right? It begins speaking loudly. So in other words, you experience it in its fullness, right? And these cascade around your perception, and you become in the midst of this vibratory column, which holds you and endows you the graceful presence of perception. So this is what it will be like. Like, this is them trying to describe what it will be like to perceive with this new sense. Is they're saying it'll be like you are in a column of feeling the beingness of this other, whatever this other is, whether it's a plant or a thing or an animal or a person, whatever it is, that you will be in this column of their energy, perceiving what it is to be them and sharing that oneness, right? So this is intense. It's a pretty amazing message, actually. It really is. And I really appreciate they are trying very hard to talk about dancing here, to try to tell us what this is going to be like when we have no experience of it. Yeah, it's just amazing. All right. So they go on to say, it feels to the self like a melding, like a transfer of perceptual understanding from one organism to the next. These happenings can transfer with them the wisdom of each being, the feelings they contain. So this is, I mean, we talk about telepathy, what telepathy will feel like and be like, this is it. But it is way, what they're describing is way more intense than I expected. Like, I thought of telepathy as like, because there are times we all sometimes read each other's thoughts, right? Like if you have someone you're close to, like I remember as a kid, my mom and my mom was a teacher at my high school and my last 2 years. And we would get dressed in the morning and we would come out to start the day. And we would, day after day after day, we would be wearing the exact same outfit. It would be like same, same color on top and same color on bottom. And I was like, we cannot go to school wearing the exact same colors, like twinsies. But it would, like, day after day after day, this would be happening. And clearly, like, we were connected. Like, clearly we were reading each other's thoughts. And getting dressed, she's getting dressed, and somehow there's this connection that happens. So we do this already right now. So I thought telepathy would be like that. I thought it would be a thing like when you're, finishing someone's sentences, you would just hear their thoughts or know what they were thinking. But no, what they're describing here is much more immersive, right? It sounds overwhelming a little bit to me, but I imagine it's like, with the reality that we're in right now is overwhelming. This is being in the five senses is immersive and overpowering. But we're just used to it. So I think this will be the same way. I think it will be immersive and overpowering, and we will get used to it. Yeah, I guess, right? Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So they go on to say, where is this? Yeah. The sensory apparatus, as it has been, becomes secondary. It no longer contains the same meaningful interaction with your space. It holds within it navigational tools that separate you from what is physical, but they cannot embrace this larger picture which is now available to you. They cannot feel, see, or touch what your awareness can perceive. So it's going to be as if the things that seemed so powerful in terms of the five senses, that it starts to feel like, like listening to an old tinny phonograph when what you can have is like, crazy Dolby sound system. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what the five senses are going to feel like. It's going to be like, oh yeah, those are important. We need those to make sure that I don't burn myself. But there's just not a lot of information contained on those tracks, right? It's pretty limited. Whereas we have this new track of awareness, which is like, boom, where we can perceive, right? And have this much richer, deeper connection to the world. So, yeah. And then they go on to say, last paragraph, they say, thus, the embodiment as you have been graced becomes a vehicle tangential to what is real. Yeah. So the vehicle, the body as a vehicle is still important, still there, but it is tangential to what we perceive as real, which is this new awareness that we can connect to, this new participation and belonging to the all, right? The self as you are becomes the operator of a livelihood and way of living that extends far beyond the capacity of the physical being. And this, we say, is your enjoyment to come. I love that they finish with that. That's the great. Yeah. And they're saying, reminding us this is going to be great. Like, it might sound scary or overwhelming and saying, and it's going to be great. You're going to love it. Yeah. So the self as you are, so your higher self, the big self inside of you, and the big self that we are making space for, letting in, becomes the operator, right, of a livelihood and way of living that extends far beyond the capacity of the physical being. So it really is like we've been going through life in a spacesuit and only perceiving what we can see out this tiny little window and with whatever other little feelers we have in our spacesuit. And all of a sudden we take the spacesuit off, right? And we get to be out in the all. Yeah, just amazing, amazing, amazing. So that's the message. Yeah, pretty incredible. Oh, and I will show you guys the jungle. But I want to tell you first to remind you, as I mentioned before, Soul Convergence starts February 10th. This is a deep and meaningful healing experience. You will have personal interactions with the angels because as we go through these sessions, there is a healing that's happening for each person, but you will have your own angels working with you specifically. Most or many people in the program have their own personal experience of their connection with the angels through their healing journey. So it's an amazing process. And I hope if you feel called to join us that you'll be there. We start February 10th. It's at my website, anntucker.com. All right, so here, check this out. So jungle, let's see if I can pick this up without totally shaking and giving you guys motion sickness. But yeah, there we go. There are the tendrils and vines and the craziness of the jungle. So, all right, you guys, see if I can get you back on here without it being too jiggly. There we go. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next Friday live. Bye, you guys.